Very good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Thought Leadership webinar presented by Cegos Asia Pacific and supported by Human Resources Online. My name is Aditi. I'm the Regional Editor for HRO, and today I also have the pleasure to welcome you all on this pleasant morning. First of all, we want to thank you for joining us today. Research shows that CEOs' concern about having the right skills in their workforce has more than doubled in 20 years. So clearly, to upskill or not to upskill is no longer the question anymore. And it is certainly not just an HR priority anymore. So in today's webinar, we hope to lighten your workload by putting together an exciting panel discussion and key takeaways featuring CXOs who are passionate about learning and they are equipped to put together the right business case for their organization. Now, just before we start, I want to make sure that all of you are really nicely plugged in. You can hear me, you can see me, so that you can enjoy the panel discussion later to the fullest. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you will be seeing a chat box. There's a chat, Q&A, and handouts. So maybe you could just head over to the chat box and let me know if you can hear me well, if I'm loud and clear, which I hope to be. And if you just want to say hi or a good morning, you're welcome to do that as well. So I'll wait for your messages before I start. I do want to make sure that all of you can hear me and see me nicely. Okay, so while I wait to hear from some of you on this, I do want to assure you that, oh, fantastic. I do see a few messages coming in now. Audible, yes, hear me and see me well. That is awesome. That's a good way to start this morning. Very glad to know that all of you are having a good time all logged in. The good thing is that my colleague Shuhui is actually on tech support duty. So in case you have any queries on your audio visual, you need any support at all, please let us know in the chat box and she will contact you using a personal message on the Q&A session. So please feel free to let us know just in case you face any issues. Now, I know you're looking to get started. So before that, just a couple more things to note so that you can have a great and valuable experience today. On the agenda, as I promised you, is a panel discussion on the topic, building an L&D strategy to help combat tough times. And shortly, I'll be introducing you to our respected speakers as well. After the panel discussion, it will be followed by a live Q&A session with our speakers. Many of you have taken the time to pre-submit your questions during your registration. So we'll be trying to weave those into the conversation. So do look out for that. And for the rest of you, please feel free to start sharing your questions right away. Once again, to share your questions, you need to just head over to the Q&A panel, again on the right-hand side of your screen. Once you go to the Q&A panel, simply type out whatever question you have. And here's the cooler thing, you can actually vote for your favorite question. So if someone's already asked a really good question and you want to make sure the speakers answer that, give it a vote, give it a thumbs up so that it appears higher in the priority for the speakers. Now, before we kick off the discussion, I would be very keen to invite our friends from Cegos to share their opening thoughts, please. And doing so is Sean Dakota, Country Commercial Lead Indonesia and Key Account Business Partner for Asia Pacific, Cegos Asia Pacific. Sean is an entrepreneurial and self-driven commercial leader with 14 years of experience leading sales teams and achieving performance in Singapore and across the region. He, in fact, started off his career in direct sales at 19 years old and has just been picking up experience since then. He has been passionate about personal mentorship as well, and he continues his own quest for mastery by taking up new courses personally and professionally every year. Therefore, he's really the right person to kick us off into this discussion on L&D. So, Sean, do join us and welcome to the conversation.
Hi, welcome and a very good morning to all of you. Thank you so much, Aditi, for the warm and extravagant welcome to this webinar. I see about over 50 participants so far that's logged in live, and it is really, it's really heartwarming to see or to feel your presence. I can't exactly see you, but well, the most important thing is this morning itself will be a good. I'm looking forward to having a good 1 hour session with our panel that's upcoming. And the more important thing would be to thank each and every one of you for taking this 1 hour out of your working hour to join us live to talk about or to listen to this topic on ready, resilient, and relevant, and how we can build an L&D strategy to help combat tough times. I mean, today we are in an all VUCA world experience right live in as this pandemic has forced us to recover, rebuild, and even reshape ourselves in order for us to pivot, to survive, or even to thrive. If you're on LinkedIn almost every other day, just like myself, the message you will see is very consistent and heartwarming. You see many HR professionals step up their game to help the rest of the community. I mean, I don't know about you, but I find that if you are in HR, you have the biggest heart in your organization. Oh, I could be biased. So anyway, I'm Sean, and I represent Cegos Asia Pacific. We are actually a French company with close to 100 years of global experience in learning and development, specializing in soft skills development, and to put it more specifically, transforming individuals' behaviors to achieve business performance in the workplace. Now, I will admit to you that we're also in this stage where the pandemic has hit us, has affected our participants, has affected our organizations, and in fact, we're pivoting just like everyone else. Unlike traditional training companies, we partner with human resource chiefs, such as the talented panel that we have today, to develop performance-driven learning journeys for managers and their teams. So most of you are probably used to webinars by now, as this is probably a daily routine for most of you. And I'm just going to share with you 2 reasons why today's session is different. First reason is, today we have a panel of 4 amazingly talented human resource chiefs, all in just 1 single hour. I mean, it's not all the time that you get 4 really, really amazing, all packed up in this very tight time slot. Unfortunately, we had a few more guest speakers who want to come on board, but due to the time constraint, we could only afford this 4. Second reason why this webinar is different is because if you stay on to the end of this session, you will actually receive a complimentary copy of our white paper, which is on the future of soft skills. Now, to jump right in and to hand it back over to Aditi, one key message you will be taking back today is this. So look out for this. How do we speak with the right language to create a compelling business case for your L&D programs to your C-suite leaders? So without further ado, I think I will hand the time back to Aditi to continue this show.
Thank you so much, Sean. What a great way to get everyone pumped up. And let me tell you, you are not biased at all. HR people are amazing.
Glad to know that.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Sean absolutely rightly said, this is going to be a great conversation. And without further ado, I do have the privilege to announce the panelists on stage. Our first speaker, he specializes in talent and leadership management across Asia, Europe, and North America, and currently leads people and organization transformation strategy in his role as head of Group Human Resources UOB. So let's say good morning to Dean Tong. We are then joined by a leader whose multifaceted experience includes 17 years in sales, commercial, and HR functions across 2 global FMCG organizations. She is the Chief Human Resources Officer at JLL Asia Pacific. A big welcome to Helen Snowball. Our next panelist is Thomas Wai, Chief People Officer, National Gallery, Singapore, where he is responsible for shaping the culture and employee experience across the full spectrum of HR, talent management, OD, and more. Good morning, Thomas, and we're so glad that you can join us. And completing this panel is a leader who is passionate about digital transformation through collaborative teams. What's more, she strongly believes in empowerment as a means to progress both personally and professionally. And as a leader, she surely advocates that for the organization. Let's welcome Vivian Chua, Vice President and Head of Singapore and Malaysia, as well as the Singapore Managing Director for HP Inc. Good morning, Vivian, and thank you for joining. So there you have it. We do have our complete set of panelists ready and excited to go. And we're so glad that all of you have been able to join us this morning. Thanks so much for taking the time. And I'm just raring to get right into it. So the first question, and perhaps Helen, I would have the pleasure to start with you on this one. Where does L&D fit in the overall talent management framework? How far have we come?
Good morning, first of all, everybody, and thank you for the very warm welcome. What did he say? Amazing talent. I don't think I've ever been introduced. So so thank you for that. So to answer your question, Aditi, at JLL, where I'm currently working, I can tell you that it is an absolute critical part of the overall talent management framework. In fact, I'd say kind of it's front and center. So if you think about it in today's world, employees, they look to employers in terms of what we can offer in terms of skills, investment and development when they're making their decisions in terms of whether or not they're going to join an organization. So it's very, very much part of our employee brand proposition. It's very, very much part of our talent attraction strategy. And then once we're lucky enough to get great talent into the organization, making sure we're offering them with really good opportunities for continued learning and development is effectively part of our retention strategy and ongoing engagement strategy. So if I work my way around the employee life cycle, from my perspective, it is absolutely front and center and very, very business critical.
Business critical indeed. So how about you, Thomas? Do you resonate with that? And have you seen things change during the pandemic or because of the pandemic?
Well, absolutely. I think first, thank you and good morning to all. Thank you for registering for this conference and good to share some feedback and inputs. Training, development, absolutely very, very critical. If there's anything changes, it is only becoming more important and more critical than ever. I do see some changes in terms of shifting the priority. I think we have been talking about agility and digital engagement for a very long time. But today, everybody is on Zoom, everybody's on Teams, everyone go hang out, everybody is leveraging variety of digital platform. And how do we engage? How does leaders and managers engage with their employees who some of them are native in technology and digital, but some of them are not. So how do you create that harmonious environment to engage with employees through a digital means? That's a new training need. But in terms of training and development, it fit right in the overall development, I think not only for National Gallery Singapore, but also for all the companies in Singapore as well.
Absolutely, well said. And I'm glad you mentioned agility and digital engagement. I know that's a topic that's quite relevant to most of you. And I'd like to bring the question of digital engagement over to you, Dean. I know you've been working really hard, churning out a lot of interesting campaigns in digital engagement. So what's been happening at your end?
My L&D team has been the busiest during this period. At UOB last year, we actually launched a program called Better You. And the intent of the program is to reskill and upskill 27,000 people. So this is a mammoth task that we have actually put in front of us. To do so, I think one of the biggest challenge of reskilling, upskilling is that the visibility of how roles will change in the future is not entirely transparent. In fact, for some of the roles that we see, from a teller going into sort of a digital teller behind this screen, those are the exception. For most part of the roles, these are actually still very much unknown exactly when and what shape it will take. So for us, there was a journey that we needed to embark on. And we know that disruption that has happened in other industries will happen in the banking industry as well. So then how do you prepare your people and bring them along this journey? And digital adoption is actually one of the means to actually get to the scale that we need to reach out to 27,000 people. So with Better You, we actually launched a program that combines a classroom training, a one-day classroom training, followed by 12 weeks of digital learning. And that is to really develop soft skills. So it's a very different angle from others that may have actually attempted the same reskilling before. And the journey has started, and I must say, this is something that we have actually learned a lot along this journey. And during the pandemic, the digital learning experience needed to be even accelerated further. So the one-day in-person training I mentioned to you, even that had to be virtualized. So now the entire program is completely digital led. But what we want to make sure is that the whole human experience is actually well maintained.
Absolutely. Well said. And, I like the fact that you started off giving credit to your L&D team right away. They have been the busiest during this pandemic. And that's not the first time I'm hearing that. So clearly this is really top of the mind, unlike, previous downturns where we've had like budgets slashed and, not so pleasant things happening. But this time things are different. Vivian, I'd like to bring you into the conversation because I know you're extremely passionate and you work very closely with your CHRO and you've been rolling out a whole bunch of holistic programs. Take us through, share some context, and then we will move into the soft skills topic from here.
Sure. So thank you very much, and thank you for having me, and great to be on this panel with all the great leaders here. So first of all, I do want to highlight that digital transformation is very important now more than ever, right? The Singapore Smart Nation Initiative is clearly a proof of how the Singapore government is driving Singapore as a city, as a global city, to improve our lives and livelihood going into the future. Now, at HP, we also have adopted digital. In fact, we have initiated a new learning initiative called Speak Digital to ensure that all the employees speak a common language. And it comes to common language when it comes to digital literacy, and it revolves around 5 key topics to ensure our success in the industry, right? Whether it's artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, big data, virtual reality, and also cybersecurity that is very crucial to our day-to-day life now. And at the same time, even for employees, there is an app that we can embark upon called Digital Fitness to let our employee understand their current knowledge and explore new topics that are critical for them in terms of business, in terms of experience, and in terms of technology. So these are some of the new digital initiatives that HPA has embarked upon to ensure that we continue to develop and upskill our employees during this pandemic.
It's really heartwarming to see that all of you have actually spent more time in L&D than possibly you had, kind of budgeted for or expected to this year. But that's a great way to start. And thanks so much for building the context, everybody. Now, I'm hearing, from Dean, a huge focus on soft skills, digital transformation. The same is resonating with you as well, Vivian, very much about the RPA, the big data. Thomas and Helen, what are some of the hottest skills that you are looking at, for your sector, or possibly, function agnostic soft skills or hard skills that you're really looking to groom at the moment? Maybe you could go first, Thomas.
Absolutely. So at the National Gallery of Singapore, or in the art and culture sector, we kind of dissect our skills in a few categories. The first category is like a soft skill, so we call it a competency. So it's a competency framework. So anything that can be trained as a competency, a skill sets, right? So we have competency framework. Then we also have functional skills, because in our sector, in the art, we need to learn about curating. We need to learn about art. We need to know about the difference between ink, between oil, between calligraphies and modern art, very, very functionals. And we also have what we call a mandatory. So people come in museum to need to know about this in a non-profit organization. That's a museum. How many millions of visitors we need to welcome in a year? What do we need to do? How do we keep a smile? How do we deal with complaints? But we also have a specialized stream. We call it self-initiate, because we believe not only a mandatory skills that we believe, the management believe all the individuals need to have, and what the function leaders believe that they need to equip the functions, and what we believe that all the soft skills like the strategic thinking, like the stakeholder management, like the agility, teamwork. But a big key component is empower the individuals and let you tell us what do you need to develop to become a better professional or a person. So I think that is about empowerment. That's about, so particularly about the soft skill, we're talking about the strategic thinking skills, the agility, stakeholder management, engagement, and also execution become very, very critical for us.
Very nicely summarized, and absolutely agree with you on your functional skills as well. Quite an exciting pool of functional skills that I'm sure you and your team have. Thanks very much, Thomas. And Helen, what's your take on this one?
So my take is that I think there's a bit of an assumption that when you get into a senior leadership position, that you actually have high levels of emotional intelligence and social skills and the ability to kind of navigate through complexity and uncertainty and ambiguity. And I think what we found at JLL is that that's not always the case. So what we've been focusing on for the last kind of few months in particular is really trying to kind of support our leaders in really honing in their soft skills around empathetic and inspirational leadership. So really trying to, help support people in terms of how do you really care through times of ambiguity? How do you show care? How do you show compassion? How do you connect with your people when you're kind of in a virtual environment? How do you cast optimism? How do you give people the confidence that we're going to get through this crisis and actually, the world is going to be a better place? How do you build resilience? So where we've really doubled down is really on leadership and around leadership in building empathy, building inspiration, and also making sure that our people have the skills to lead through ambiguity, which is not easy. And I think there's been a lot of learnings for us in terms of not making the assumption that that's a skill for everybody.
Absolutely, I agree with you. We really can't afford to make assumptions. You want to make that very conscious effort to building these skills in your workforce. Something you touched on as well, Thomas, which was around one of the skills that are quite in demand, which is stakeholder management. And I know that we've actually received questions during registration on this topic as well, in terms of how do you really engage your entire C-suite, in coming up with this new age L&D strategy. How do you get the budgets on board? It's a very resource-strapped environment for most companies. And it's what I'd really like to understand is, what is your strategy in actually building that stakeholder engagement and buy-in? And Dean, I'd love to hear your views on this, as you've been rolling out quite a few things in the recent past.
Yes, indeed. That was the reason why I was brought on board at UOB. Right. I actually started off as a consultant to UOB, helping the team to develop a transformation plan. And subsequently, the CEO said, why don't you actually deliver on the plan that you have actually come up with? So that has been my mission over the last 2 years. Now, as you mentioned, one of the most critical aspects of the plan is to make sure that we get the buy-in from everyone in the top management team, starting from the CEO, but all the C-suites as well. And at UOB, we have a committee called HRC, HR committee. It's made up of the most senior management team within the organization. So we actually make decisions through the HRC. And the way the plan has been presented is not in sort of piecemeal, but rather the whole people transformation plan were presented as a whole. And the L&D, the upskilling, the reskilling, if you will, is one of the many interlocking components that is required to future-ready the organization and our people along the way. We also make the case that because we actually set aside some $26 million for part of this reskilling program. And if you take just a look at this, the ROI alone, right? Immediately after the training, I want to see an ROI. Then very few companies will actually take the first step, especially in training for soft skills, because soft skills takes time for you to. Hence, it is important to actually position the investment in a slightly different light as well. What if you don't do this? Right? What are the obligations of the company for the bank in this particular case? So the benefits that we see actually cut across multiple things, from just the productivity improvement that you see to staff engagement, to retention, to also our ability to hire from the market. Now, today, many of you also know that the government has actually pumped in quite a lot of money to support jobs. So the job support schemes, many have used this for various purposes to pay salaries and so on and so forth. At UOB, we have set aside that money that we have received from the government, which is above $100 million for the purpose of reskilling the employees. Right. So this money is actually being reinvested back to make sure that our employees are being taken care of, to make sure that they stay relevant in the industry.
I think very nicely explained. So apart from, the fact that you need to bring in the experts, people who are willing to kind of wrangle and have those conversations, but also to make the collective and collaborative decisions as part of like the, HR council, and to highlight the benefits. So the benefits that cut across the functions and therefore get more leaders involved. And of course, good and well-planned use of the funding. I think that's another important thing to note, as many companies are being fortunate enough to benefit from the government funding support at the moment. Vivian, would you like to add your opinions on this, on top of this?
Sure. So for us at HP, our HR strategy is brought to life, right, around 4 priorities. Number one, really creating a growth mindset across the different function team and the different departments, right? And it allows the individual to remain relevant and forward thinking. Secondly, was to make sure that we have a strong sales culture throughout the organization. We've been around for 50 years in Singapore. So we need to continue to drive that growth, that development in people, to make sure that we continue to be relevant in the next 50 years, right? We also want to ensure that we continue to manage and develop our talent, so that we ensure that the company creates opportunity for them to seek growth, maybe do job rotation, look for another way to expand their knowledge on top of just what they are doing today, and empowering them to make the decision with strategic and creative thinking. And last but not least, really was the portion of embracing diversity and inclusion in everything that we do here in Singapore. Here in Singapore is our Asia HQ, Asia Pacific HQ. So there are more than 3,000 employees that we have in Singapore, and across 35 nationalities. We have to make sure that the commitment given to train and develop our people continue to happen, and ensure that we create a melting pot of talent to allow our people to be more forward thinking, more inclusive, and also allow Singapore to be an exporter of talent across to our different offices across the world.
So these are leadership attributes that you really try and inculcate in the rest of your management team as well, right, Vivian?
That is correct.
Right. Okay. Helen, does this sort of resonate with your experience, sort of like having collective values that you try and imbibe within the rest of your C-suite?
Absolutely. Look, I concur with everything that's been said. I think, when it comes to kind of securing buy-in and securing investment, you have to have buy-in from the very top, which basically means it has to be 100% linked to your business strategy. I agree with Dean, it has to be co-owned between HR and the business. I agree that you need to kind of do almost the lost opportunity kind of exercise in terms of, if we didn't put this investment or we didn't do this, what are we actually kind of, putting at risk within the organization. And I think we also need to kind of provide optionality to the C-suite and to the business in terms of kind of how we can go about the learning. It's not just what we do, but how we do it. And the only final thing I would build on this particular kind of question or topic would be, I also think we've got a responsibility to look inwards. So, I kind of always say to my team is, we need to be leading by example. So we need to be making sure that, our L&D departments are lean, they're agile, they're more strategic, so that we actually don't come under fire. Because in my opinion, or in my experience, that's actually what makes it much easier to have the conversation when you kind of role model in the values and the management style that you want from everybody else.
Absolutely. Like Sean was saying earlier when we started the webinar, is because you really have to try and model the same values, attributes, and show the same commitment to upskilling, for example, that you are really gunning for in your organization as well.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Really well shared, everybody. Thanks so much for your opinions so far. To all of our audience members, thanks so much for joining us and for your comments. We are seeing them, and we know you loved Vivian's take on D&I. So thanks so much for that. I know some of the questions are starting to come in, so please feel free to go ahead and vote for the questions that really resonate with you, or feel free to input your own questions as well. Now, Thomas, I do want to come to you for my next question, and I'll probably go around the table for this one. But the question is really about ROI or not to ROI. You know, it's a tale that just hasn't been told enough yet, so we have to bring it up. Can we really break it down into dollars and cents? Do we need to break it down? And what is the approach that you are personally taking?
So apps is important because people need to see and they need to know what is the return on investment. Now, some can, some can't. As the national and the museum sector, like any other organizations, we measure very closely about like what we call OCR, which is the organization cost recovery. So it's an absolute number. So it's a percentage. So for example, a 20% of organization cost recovery OCR is low, 40% is good. So if we train people in that aspect, we should see a direct correlation to the improvement OCR. So that's a very hard metric because it's in terms of number, we can measure it. Other things like is about customer service, right? Because we measured customer satisfaction, it's scores. So 60% very low, 90% not enough. That's a carry perspective, right? Because we want everybody come to the museum to enjoy a great time. So when we improve our frontliner, our HODs, we have several hundreds of people servicing at the National Gallery each day. So looking at it and how do we servicing, how do we deal with complaints, how do we service a family with kids, without kids, people with OFOX, who are disabled, you know, and on. So there are different expectations. If we train our people well, we should be able to reflect those in our scores. So just want to mention about OCR and also about customer satisfaction, visitorship, etc. Now, having said, some of the skills very, very hard, difficult to measure, which we also set up a D&I initiative in the National Gallery. So for the Diversity and Inclusivity Committee, we launched programs like unconscious bias. It's just very difficult to measure in my experience, very difficult to measure. Are people more aware of the unconscious bias or professional boundaries? Or people know what to say? These are very soft. So some of the skills I think can, some of the skills is just harder or take a longer time to realize. That's how we approach the return on investment subject when it comes to training and development.
Okay, I think that is a very valuable way of looking at it. Thanks so much, Thomas. I'm going to come straight to you, Dean. What's your take on this? How do you manage or maybe not manage this?
My previous life as a consultant, I actually do a lot of ROI for investments that you make. And I think in the case of HR investment, there's actually no difference. I think the more concrete you can make it, the better for us. And also, I think just to be fair to the organization as well, we need to also establish accountability. Any investment dollars that we put in, we want to make sure that we're actually getting the return that we should be getting. Now, one easy way to actually overcome an over-analysis on trying to get to an ROI is simply by asking a simple question that how much does it cost you to do certain things? And do we believe that the benefit actually outstrips that cost? So instead of trying to predict all the benefits are possible, but we believe that by doing, say, for example, the rescaling that we are actually spending, that if I can just move the needle on productivity by just 1%, and that more than pay off the investment. That's all you need to establish. You do not need to actually establish a clear number, because all these are based on assumptions, and we know what happens to assumptions. These are all guesswork as well. So you can actually change the dynamic of the conversation to focus on a more productive way of having that conversation.
Yep, I like how succinctly you put it, that the more concrete you can make it, subject to the organizational context, the better, and fewer assumptions, more really focus on the actual value and the accountability of the function Thanks so much for summing that up very nicely, Dean. And Vivian, does that sort of resonate with you? What would you like to share on this contentious topic?
Yeah, so I think the measure of success is pretty subjective, right, in different organizations. I think there are a few key ones that we look at HP. I think clearly from being in a sales organization, the easiest way is actually looking at performance, business performance against the targets that's being set by the company, right? The other one that we also look at a lot of time is clearly employee satisfaction in the way that we do our yearly survey, as well as employee retention that we have in Singapore. So I think these are clear measures on the success of L&D as part of the entire ecosystem of developing, training, and also retaining employees in Singapore for us.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is really a subjective question indeed. And Helen, would you like to complete the conversation on this topic?
Yeah, look, I agree with everything that's been said. I actually personally think it's incredibly hard to make a direct correlation between kind of investment and performance, because there's so many other dynamics, like the market dynamics, the competitor, like there's so many other factors. So it's very, very hard. So some of the things that we do at JLL and Vivian, we do the same. We look at kind of attrition and kind of, people send in exit surveys. We look at our engagement results. And a couple of other things that we use are participation rates. So we kind of take the approach, if we've got good quality products that we're putting out into the organization, we measure interest and participation, and then obviously kind of qualitative feedback after that. We take NPS, so we look at net promoter scores for our clients. There's some conversations and some comments there around the capability of our people, so we look at the feedback we get and the qualitative data there. We do 360 of our leaders, so if we're doing a lot of investment in leadership development, we put a lot of 360s to see whether or not the investment is giving us a return in terms of the experience for our people. Those are just some examples of how we attempt to demonstrate to the organization that their investment is giving them a return. But I do agree, it's very contentious. It's very hard to get a direct correlation. But I think the good news is that conceptually, everybody gets it. So people know it's actually not a choice anymore. I think you said this up front, Aditi. You have to invest if you're going to survive. So I think it's easier for us now than what it ever has been.
I like how honestly you say, Helen, that these are some of the ways that we attempt to really make it happen. But absolutely, it's been a fantastic conversation so far. I just want to stop and just thank you guys. Your inputs have been so exciting. I really just want to keep this going. And I now want to actually bring in the question from our lovely delegates. We've got quite a few coming in, and we've got some questions that are really picking up on the votes. So I'll be moving into the Q&A session. Feel free to keep sharing your questions with us, and we're going to try and storm through them and get as many of them as possible answered. So the first one, and this one, how about I share it with you, Vivian. This one got the highest vote so far. L&D is often deemed to be important as part of talent management and retention. However, when it comes to time of budget or cost reduction, training is often the first to be cut. And we have discussed this. How can we change this mindset or wrong approach? Thank you, Daniel, for that question.
To me, I feel that a lot of the budgets are clearly, the conversation is around how we optimize that, right? I think today, given the current pandemic, a lot of the content are already online, virtual, and it's on demand, right? And actually, there's a lot of economies of skills that we can drive out of a single content. And at the same time, there are a lot of content that the company do sign on, for example, like with LinkedIn training, MIT, Coursera, that, everyone outside can leverage as well. So I think budget is one concern. The other one is clearly how to make it optimized and economies of scale to ensure that we still deliver quality content to the people at the same time.
Right, and I hope that resonates with the views of the rest of the panelists as well, yes?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And the other thing I do, just to build, is I kind of try and use data and insight. So in my organisation, I kind of talk about the roles that exist today that didn't exist only 24 months earlier, and the types of skills that you need to be successful. And I kind of say, well, if that was to continue, do you think we have the skills to succeed? We don't. Therefore, you kind of need to take a longer term perspective as opposed to a short-sighted cost saving opportunity. And that's kind of how I'm trying to get continued investment.
Fantastic. I think that those are very practical insights that both of you have shared. Thanks so much on that. The next question, Dean, this one goes straight over to you. For an MNC organization like UOB with tens and thousands of employees, how do you identify roles and skills across the board without having programs that are too generic?
Let me be very specific here in terms of the programs that we have actually launched. As I mentioned to you, we launched a program called Better You, and that is actually a generic program focusing on soft skills. And the soft skills are actually only 5 areas that we look at, starting with growth mindset, and then you have the digital awareness, followed by human-centered design, data storytelling, and complex problem solving. So all these are skill sets that machine will not replace you. So machine can actually identify the dots, but they cannot connect the dots. But having these soft skills, you are able to connect dots and tell the story around those dots, and you're always applying a growth mindset in any situation that you become more adaptable as well as you change. Now, the way to look at this training is that this is not going to prepare you immediately for what you need to do in your new skills, but these are the foundational skills, the seed for you to become more adaptable. And when time comes, when we have more visibility on specifically how a particular role is going to be evolve. For example, in the space of channel for us, how our channel staff, the tellers, some of the service staff, their role will actually change. Then we can provide specific technical skills to help them in their transition. But once they have the foundation, that retraining, if you will, becomes a lot easier. And that's the philosophy that we have actually been applying. So we have various stages. First stage is a generic one, followed by a deep dive. And in fact, if staff really have the appetite to want to go even further, they can even take up a degree course and even a master to pivot their career. And the bank is prepared to fund all this as long as they successfully complete those courses. Right? So most people can start, but they may not have the discipline to finish it. So that is actually the condition that we've set.
Okay, well explained. So it's very much like a funnel approach. You know, you start with the generic 5 skills, and then it's really up to the employees to take accountability and really work their way up the funnel. Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Dean. And I hope that answers the question for you, Andrew. The next question, Helen, may I jump over to you for this one? This was submitted during registration by Rose Espina. Rose is asking, how can we market soft skills and rebrand it so that it doesn't come across as soft, but rather as a critical skill in today's new world order?
Maybe we start with the actual rebranding of the terminology soft skills. Maybe that's actually where we do need to start. Look, I think at JLL, I think what we're trying to do is, maybe what Dean was saying is, you know, we've got a number of skills that we are basically proposing without a crystal ball will be important for future commercial success. So what we're trying to do is kind of land all of our communications in, this is a commercial decision. It's commercial for the business, as in JLL, but also for you as an employee to make you more marketable, whether you stay at JLL or whether you move to a different organization. So, and that's how we're kind of honing in and trying to get the message across that this is not the soft, fluffy stuff. This is the stuff that actually drives business performance, and without it you will not be successful. So we've been as direct as that. And even when it comes to things like leadership, you know, I talked earlier around empathetic leadership, and you know, some of my, let's just say, more old school leaders would say, oh, you know, Helen, what do you mean care, compassion? You know, it does come across sometimes as HR speak, but when you convert it into if you don't care for your employees, if they don't feel that, you know, that you're vested in them as individuals, they will not be engaged, they will not perform in role. That will lead to non-performance. Like, the actual kind of linear way of talking it through to get to a commercial outcome is pretty straightforward. But unfortunately for some people, we have to do that, and that's how I'm approaching it at JLL.
Yeah, and maybe I should add some soft skills is not just on top of the ones that Helen has mentioned, right? There are a lot of soft skills that are very critical now, especially in this digital age, right? Things like data analytics, design thinking, creative storytelling, and I think these are key attributes and skill sets that individuals need to have in order to be able to converse with the customer digitally at this point in time. And on top of that, it actually adds on to your future value, right? To equip yourself and to be ready for the future as well.
That was a really comprehensive answer. Thanks, Helen. Thanks, Vivian. And it's interesting to see the skills you raised are actually the skills that Dean mentioned earlier as well. So I think there's really across the board an acceptance that these are perhaps not soft skills, but maybe we are putting in a petition to call it business critical skills or future critical skills. And maybe that's where the rebranding that you started with, Helen, you know, we actually need to kind of look at that. Okay.
Survival skills, I call them.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Survival skills is what I call them.
Right? Absolutely, survival skills. So that's really how we are kind of branding it, and we are really thinking like marketeers as well, I suppose, in that aspect. Okay, thanks so much, everybody. So far, Thomas, I'd be coming to you for the next question. And this one comes from Munchon. I agree we need top buy-in to get the support, especially to ensure that the project has momentum to continue to be implemented. But the tougher issue is that the buy-in from the ground, especially those with a strong mindset not aligned to L&D strategy. So how can we continue to ensure that the leadership continues their emphasis and not wane off halfway through the implementation? How can we get that sustained leadership support?
I think that's a great question, because when we're talking about stakeholder management, I don't think it's one-dimensional. The top leadership, the CEO, the C-suite, and the management support is critical. But at the same time, that's multidimensional. The ground need to feel that this is important. So at the National Gallery side, we do a lot of ground surveys. We do tons of pulse survey, 360. We do like tea session. We meet people with feedback session. We let the people tell us what is important for them based on what they know. So we get a lot of survey, get a lot of data, get a lot of feedback, so that we know this is what the ground is. Now, we look at that as a data point. We also look at the external trend. We're talking about digital transformation. We talk about absolutely the research component, the research analytical skills, the design thinking. This is like outside. So we look at internal data point, external data point. We also do a lot of interviews with our assistant leaders. So we build what we call a leadership profile. How does a leader looks like today and tomorrow? So we dissect those, become a skill set, and then with all the data point, we formulate a strategy in a framework. And we tell people that now this is what you tell us is important for you, and this is what we are going to do. So in that case, the ground will support, because this is what you hear from them. Like, I think one of the initiatives that I think Vivian touched on is a D&I. The D&I initiative wasn't really just come from the top and say, hey, let's have a D&I. No, it's because our people feel that diversity and inclusivity is important. So they build a project, build a proposal, present it. What we do is just facilitate that presentation discussion to the management. They prepared the case, they did the research internally, externally, go globally to see that is important. And the management buy-in, because this is important for the people. So in that case, you would have the entire organization from the ground up and also top them down. And we do a lot of partnership in that case. So in this case, they become not a C-suite initiative or not a top management initiative or not a ground initiative. It becomes an organization initiative that, hey, this is something that we want to do because we know this is important for us today and tomorrow.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Thomas. And yes, absolutely. It's almost like you're crowdsourcing, aspects of the campaign from across employee groups. and therefore you build buy-in. But at the same time, I like how you mentioned about the data points. All of you have really talked about data points, and I think it's critical for us to have those data points to continue and sustain any campaign. So thanks very much for answering that, and I hope that resonates with your question as well. Dean, may I pull you in for the next question? Because this one, they're asking for some advice for SMEs. Hui Ling, thank you for your question. What would be your advice for SMEs where L&D budget is usually tight? We have a wide range of ages, diverse backgrounds. How do we establish an L&D strategy in these cases? Where can we even begin?
It's indeed a challenge, because when your organization does not have the scale to actually start off something from scratch, you will take you a disproportionate amount of effort to actually get started. My advice is to actually leverage what is already out there, rather than try to actually build everything from within. I mentioned to you the program that we have launched at UOB. In fact, one of our vision is to actually give back to the community as well. And we understand that for many SMEs, because they do not have the scale, they will not be able to design and actually host some of the programs that we are being able to do so. So we are actually offering SME as well to actually participate on our platform. We're not making money, but it's just simply as a way to actually give back, so that more people from the community can actually be better prepared for the future, right? So I would encourage them to actually reach out to some of such organizations for help, able to actually help them achieve that scale that they need.
Fantastic, absolutely. And it does go back to, giving back to the community as well, from the experience of like larger organizations. But at the same time, like you said, you don't always have to start ground up. We can always repackage, repurpose, recycle some of the existing best practices that are out there. So great, thanks very much for that. And this is,
I think, sorry, Aditi, can I just add one thing to that? Because I think sometimes, even our SMEs, certainly at JLL, I think there's a mindset that kind of L&D is still kind of programmatic and content heavy. And I think, some of the best learning that I think we've had is actually more experiential, so which actually doesn't cost anything. So I think if you can get really quite creative around what is it you're trying to address, it doesn't always cost budget. And I think part of our role as, future focused HR professionals and L&D professionals is to really try and get much more creative with our thinking and how we can actually develop the skills from within. Because I think experiential learning is not always an expensive initiative.
Right.
Absolutely agree. Yeah. Thanks so much for chiming in for that one, Helen. And this is possibly the last question that I can take. So let's make it a good one. This question, I'm flying to you, Vivian, for this. Would like to understand an example of a structured framework to get C-suite commitment for upskilling teams. And this one comes to us from Jasmine. So what kind of a framework would you as the MD like to see in order to get C-suite commitment for upskilling?
So as I mentioned just now in the conversation as well, right? The organization, the company understood that it's important to continue to develop and grow our talent. And I think the 4 pillars that I mentioned just now, having a growth mindset, cultivating a strong sales culture, managing and developing our talent, and embracing diversity and inclusion are the key pillars that the organization from top to bottom understand. And in all the different functions and different levels, everybody will embrace these 4 pillars to develop the L&D strategy. And I think it's important, right? Because if you look at it, what we are doing in terms of buying and selling today are very different from where HP was 50 years ago. Today there is a lot of social media marketing, digital marketing that we don't do in, previously, right? So as we continue to embrace the changes, we need to continue to stay relevant and learn new skills to make sure that the company also remains relevant. And I think at HP, we do understand that, given the company in US has been there for 80 years. In Singapore, we've been here for 50 years, right? And it is important for us to continue to stay relevant. And I think that serves as the main framework for us to continue to grow in the country.
Absolutely. So it really links back to business resilience, business competitiveness, and if it's going to make the business, fight smarter, harder, better in the market, then I think that's when you really have a case for any campaign. And I think that's a good note as any to end the panel discussion. Thank you all so very much for your time, your dedication, and your input so far. It's been fantastic. Thanks very, very much. And at this stage, I'd just like to share with the delegates that we know you've had a good time. We can see from the questions that you've been sharing. But if you'd like a little more support or a little more content around this topic, just head over to the right-hand side of your screen where we have the handout section. And we've actually added in a few white papers, a little bit more reading material for you in case you'd like to explore further on the topic beyond what we have already discussed. So at this stage, once again, I would like to give a big thank you to my amazing panelists who've been so ready to share all of their knowledge with us. And I am mindful of the time as well. I had promised you that we will be doing a summary and key takeaways in the beginning. So I'd be very pleased to invite the dynamic Sean Dakota back on stage to help us sum up the key takeaways from this presentation. Sean, can we have your insights, please? I think we're just having a little technical issues hearing from Sean. Do give us another quick 10 seconds while we wait to see him on the screen. I see Sean's got his, he's joined the conversation.
Okay, did we just lose everyone in the panel? Okay, so I can just do a quick summary to all those that's still hanging on, waiting to hear the summary and the key takeaways. Well, let me just do a quick sum up. I've been taking notes. I'm sure all of you must have been too. So I will just do quick key takeaways from each speaker. So from Helen, she was sharing that today, when being in the C-level, a lot of people expect that they must have high levels of EQ. Well, they actually focus on a leadership development as well as empathy, and this is actually something really heartwarming to know. She mentioned things like how do you care, how do you connect with people, how do you give confidence, and double dive on leadership during this point in time. I think that's excellent. And in fact, in looking at the question on ROI, Helen actually addressed us by saying that participation rates is what they look at, quality of interest, feedback that they actually appreciate from bottom up, NPS scores, as well as 360 leadership surveys. And in fact, this is what the she actually shared and then focused on the future of commercial success is actually really about looking at how we rebrand soft skills, how you look at it in a different way. Thomas actually shared a little bit on agility and digital engagement. I think, Thomas, you brought up a few competency frameworks and skill sets that you actually look out for. I think one of the key components about you is that you look out for empowerment of your organization, empowerment of new individuals. And, in stakeholder management, it's all about looking at data points to contribute to your growth of the L&D campaigns. One last key takeaway that I took from you, Dean, was that how a leader looks like today versus tomorrow is really all about looking at the DNI as well. Sorry, that was Thomas. So from Dean, Dean started off this whole session by saying that your L&D teams are the busiest. And in fact, that's actually something that I agree with you today. I think our productivity levels have probably shot out through the roof as well. You actually emphasize that people transformation plan and creating the better you within UOB was something that is critical today, because machines cannot learn as how humans do. And your 5 key points from better you and the mission that you drive to even open it up to the public as well as SMEs, I think that's a really great initiative. What your key advice to SMEs on leveraging what is already out there instead of building everything from within? I think that's absolutely true. It is not only about looking at expensive L&D initiatives, it's also something that's free and we can leverage on economies of scale. And Vivian, I picked up this key 4 pillars that it's just struck into me because Vivian was emphasizing on it over and over again. So I'd like to re-emphasize this to all of you listening out there. She stressed that the 4 priorities to develop the L&D strategy, one would be the growth mindset in how to remain forward-thinking. Secondly, and I resonate with this a lot too, is how to continue building a strong sales culture in your people. I think it not only limits and restricts to the sales department in an organization. I think everyone in the organization contributes to the survivability and the way an organization is going to move forward. So everyone should have a little bit of that sales instinct inside them. I think that's really good to build that sales culture. 2 more key pillars that Vivian mentioned was how to manage and empower talents, which is exactly what Thomas also has resonated with. And finally, embracing diversity and inclusion. So these 4 pillars is something that you would like to take back today to actually keep in mind on how you implement your L&D initiative. Finally, we have Dean. Dean shared a little about accountability as well on organizational in terms of your investment. I think the topic on ROI just now was a really exciting topic because it was probably something that in every L&D initiative's head. How do we ensure ROI, especially at this point in time? And Dean, I like that one last bit that you mentioned because it gives hope to all L&D and HR professionals out there that if you can move the needle on productivity by at least 1%, that already helps. And in fact, the question that you posed to everyone to think about was, how much does it cost to do something? And if you think about if the benefits outweigh that cost, then it's an initiative that you can push through. So these were some of my key takeaways. I hope that all of you sitting back home or in your offices have also done your key takeaways, your notes. I believe that all the speakers here and myself we're available to connect on LinkedIn. So please feel free to reach out, anytime. And if going forward, you need any of our advice, any of our help, anything, I'm sure each of the speakers will agree with me that we would do anything in our power to be able to help you. I hope that sums up for today.
Very, very nicely summed up. I absolutely loved your summary, and you're right. Everything that the speakers shared resonated so strongly, and it's so relevant, especially in the current context. Thank you once again to our amazing speakers for joining us. Thank you so much, Sean, for supporting us and for really sharing your top insights to conclude the presentation. And most of all, thanks to all of you who have joined us for this webinar. And I'm seeing some of your comments here, and so glad to know that you found this a useful session. It resonated with you, and you found insights that you can really take away back into the office or back into your work from home stations, and really something to put into place. So thanks so much. We do have a feedback form that's going to pop up on the screen later. So do hang on for another 10 seconds or so, and we'd love to hear your insights and feedback going into the next session. On that note, thanks all of the speakers once again, and have a great, healthy week ahead, everybody. Take care and enjoy yourselves. Take care.